Episode 258, Guilt-Ridden. Thinking of the old days, Serena smiled wider and nodded. I like it now as well. Henry's look became softer, but his eyes did not linger on her. He said ambiguously, It seems that preferences will not change at once. Ahem. Drake coughed and said, Here. I don't think I'm a stranger here. Am I? Let's start. Uncle and aunt. My brothers. Keith smiled. Drake, I haven't seen you in 2 or 3 years. Your skin has become much thicker now. Thanks for the compliment. We are no strangers, so we shouldn't be so polite. Drake's jokes made the atmosphere slightly better. Captain Robinson also smiled. He waved at Serena and pointed to the seat next to him. Sunshine, come and sit here. Serena showed Henry where the bathroom was for him to wash his hands, and then sat next to the captain. Henry naturally sat in the position next to Drake. There were many dishes for dinner. Many of them were what she loved, but what Henry had made for her. There was no it. There was also fish-flavored eggplant, fried mushrooms with shredded pork, shrimp soup, a lot of things that she liked. At first glance, she knew that they were made by Henry, because the preparation was not anything like Emma's style. She took a sip of the soup. It was very good. The soup was very fresh, delicious and sweet. Serena's eyes teared up, but she quickly held back. Picking up the fork, she took a piece of eggplant. It was a familiar taste, but it was clear that Henry's cooking had gotten even better than before. It's delicious. Serena's voice choked, but she soon smiled. Henry looked at her with a smile. There was satisfaction in his eyes. Everyone saw that subtly, but no one said anything. Her appetite was surprisingly good that day. She drank 2 bowls of soup and ate a small portion of the chicken. Although most of her food was still untouched, it was much better than the previous days. After the meal, Captain Robinson invited Henry to stay for some tea. Serena sat on the sofa in the living room and listened to Henry talking about some strange adventures. She was not stupid, so she could tell that the stories were only half true. However, she still listened with gusto. In addition, Drake was always trying to ruin the story, which was so funny that Serena laughed from time to time. Her mood became better. Keith and Alex exchanged a look but did not say anything. Carson and Nola too noticed all this and felt a sense of crisis, gazing at their father who pushed for this to happen. The captain sighed. Let's leave it like this. I can't let her continue that way. This kid has a good relationship with her, and they have known each other for so long. He should be the one who knows her best. But Jake has left us. Nola burst into tears. Dad, you are being too unfair to Jake. She didn't dare to raise her voice, although they were standing far from the living room. Captain Robinson looked in Serena and Henry's direction and sighed. His voice was full of grief. My dear Nola, this did not hit you the hardest, but also Serena. You have your husband and sons, while without him she has no one. Yes, nothing was left. What Serena needed the most now was to lift her spirits. Otherwise it posed a huge threat for her babies in her stomach, and there was no way she was going to lose them. About 9 o'clock in the evening, Drake received a call. It was Jackson. Where are you? I'm at the Robinson residence, the old house. Drake looked at the time. What happened? Don't leave just yet. Wait for me. Jackson quickly hung up the phone, and 10 minutes later, a black Bentley appeared at the door of the Robinson household. Jackson was wearing a burgundy suit, carrying health supplements bought from Australia in his hand, and feeling very anxious. Standing at the door for a long time, he reached out and pressed the doorbell. The door was quickly opened, and the person who opened the door was Keith. He saw Jackson, and there was confusion in his eyes. Jackson had dark circles and bloodshot eyes. looking tired and beaten. But he still had the kind of elegance that made him look like a prince in woe. There was guilt in his eyes. Keith was very surprised to see Jackson like that. "Brother Jackson, it's already so late. Is Serena home?" "Yes." Keith opened the door to let him in. Almost at the same time, 3 pairs of eyes in the living room looked over. When Jackson saw Serena, the guilt in his eyes became even worse. He walked over and placed the gifts on the coffee table. He called, "Serena." Serena saw the gifts that were obviously expensive, and then her eyes fell on the man. Jackson suddenly stepped back and bowed to her deeply. She was shocked, immediately stood up and said, "What are you doing?" "I'm sorry." His voice was calm, but at the same time, full of self-blame. "I'm sorry. So sorry." Drake and Henry looked at each other and did not speak. Keith was a bit puzzled and asked, "Why are you apologizing?" Alex walked over with a posture like a soldier. He was also confused. Jackson did not get up. His voice of guilt and self-blame quickly came through. "On that day, I asked Jake to come to me." Serena listened to his words and pursed her lips. She remembered of Jake's absent-mindedness on that day. He said, "Jackson had something going on. I have to go and see him." However, after checking on him, he never came back. Her eyes wet, Serena looked at him and did not speak. "On that day, if it wasn't because of me, he would not have been kidnapped by Michael Cox. He would not have..." Jackson's voice choked. "I'm sorry." Drake's eyes also turned red. He stood up and walked over, reaching for Jackson's shoulder. Jackson had grown up in the Robinson home. He, Jake, Alex, and Keith all played together when they were young. Since Jake and Jackson were of the same age, they were friends since kindergarten and went to the same school. There was not a memory in his childhood that did not involve Jake. They were the real childhood friends. Drake started hanging out with them in high school. These days, because of Jake, he had been feeling terrible. Even he was like this, let alone Jackson. It is not difficult to imagine that Jake's death would hit Jackson so hard. These days, Jackson had gone to the hospital to see Serena several times, but she had not been awake. It turned out he was going there to look for her and apologies. Serena's tears fell down and she shook her head. "It's not on you. Michael Cox is a despicable man. He had been lurking around just to wait for the opportunity when I was alone. Even if he didn't go find you that day, I know Michael would have found another time to attack."